with Jason White, exploring the great outdoors in Pennsylvania and beyond. Brought to you by the Mariana Outdoorsmen Association and by Wild Acres Farm, Fishery, and Regulated Hunting Grounds. Now, the great outdoors with Jason White.
Hello, friends. I'm Jason White. Welcome to the Great Outdoors. Great to be with you today. It is finally raining. We did enough rain dances here, I think, and we're finally getting some rain in southwestern Pennsylvania. I know some people have gotten some rain, but huge chunks of southwest PA definitely have been lackluster at best, and I mean lackluster at best. I personally have never seen such a drought in my lifetime. I'm 37. So thankfully looks like we're going to get 3 or 4 hours of some steady rain here today. So that is certainly a blessing. So for all the farmers out there, hopefully this will help you and cut back on the hay usage. I know people were already having to feed the animals. That is extremely, extremely scary. That being said, I want to give a special thanks to all of our sponsors. The U.S. Oil and Gas Alliance. Please support those folks that are advocates for the energy industry. ZLC Services, located in southwestern Pennsylvania. Also, the Mariana Outdoorsman Association. Please check us out at MarianaOutdoors.com. Again, MarianaOutdoors.com. Wild Acres Farm, Fishery, and Regulated Hunting Grounds. Please check out if you're looking to book an upland bird hunt, wild free-ranging whitetail deer hunt, and also wild turkey hunt. Great opportunities for you there. 724-579-0924. All that'll be raring to go this fall. And also 10mileco.org, TENMILECO.org. And Washington County Tourism Promotion Agency. Please visit Washington County, Pennsylvania. Special thanks to all of our sponsors. Also want to give a tip of the cap to John Kosky Contracting, Laurel Hill Trout Farm, and Octane Environmental. We recently had our annual golf outing with a collaboration with the Fayette County Farm Bureau. It was a major success, and I just want to sincerely thank everybody for all your help and support through that endeavor, and look forward to next year. Money raised is going to go towards environmental conservation. We have some pretty cool projects on the books for this year, doing some stream habitat improvement, wetland development, and got some other stuff on the radar as well. So just keep us in your thoughts, and certainly look forward to a bright future with everybody. That being said, I got a unique show today. I want to talk about the bobwhite quail reintroduction into the state of Pennsylvania. And to do that, before I jump into really the nitty-gritty details about this particular topic, I have a clip here. It's a video from the Pennsylvania Game Commission, and I want to take this video, dissect it, and more importantly, the things I do not know, the questions that are raised from this video are critical. So if you're somebody that's super intrigued about bobwhite quails, or even upland birds as a whole, migratory birds, so on and so forth, I think that this show is going to be extremely interesting for you. But I'm going to crank this on, and I want you to listen to this, really, really listen to what they say and the details therein, and then we're going to break it down.
My name's Andrew Ward. I'm the quail, pheasant, and dove biologist with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. I'm here at Fort Barfoot in Virginia as part of our Northern Bobwhite Reintroduction Project. This project has been going on for quite some time, starting with our first management plan that was approved in 2011. At one point, bobwhite inhabited every county in Pennsylvania. But over time, as their habitat dwindled or became fragmented, so too did their populations. Bobwhite require a mix of native clump and bunch grasses, particularly for nesting, woody, shrubby cover to protect them from the elements as well as predators, and then forbs and legumes to provide food, as well as quality brood habitat. They really took advantage of small family farms prior to insecticide, prior to herbicide, that were full of weeds and insects, had feathered edges between agricultural fields and adjacent wooded parts of the property. But as our modern agriculture evolved and took over some of those small family farms, bobwhite lost that habitat that they once had. As well as that, the process of natural succession often took grasslands into shrublands and then into forests, which also is not bobwhite habitat. So as that habitat declined, bobwhite also declined, eventually becoming extirpated, where we think happened in the late 1990s or early 2000s. So once we, in the late 2000s and 2010s, went to go look where we had bobwhite, if at all, we did not find that we had any breeding populations and looked to reestablish them. We found local partners at Letterkenny Army Depot for the place to reintroduce them. We found partners with Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever to help us with some of that habitat management. We've been burning and disking and applying all sorts of different disturbance mechanisms to create that quail habitat at Letterkenny, and now the time has come to reintroduce them. We've been managing for bobwhite habitat at Letterkenny since 2017, starting in some areas with a complete overstory removal, removing trees that are not bobwhite habitat and opening that up into our grassland and shrubland that they require. We use a variety of different tools and methods to manage for that habitat, but our primary tool is prescribed fire. A popular nickname for the bobwhite is the firebird because they are a fire-dependent species, and we try to burn anywhere from a half to a third of our quail habitat annually. Dependent on your quality of soil and what kind of vegetation community that you have on your site, that may vary. We find that a 2-year is our goal, with 3 years being a necessity. Our bobwhite quail focus area covers about 3,500 acres of the site at Letterkenny, whereas we've managed 2,700 acres of it to date to be quality quail habitat. So here at Fort Barfoot, we're sourcing up to 25 birds annually for a 3-year period as part of our reintroduction.
It's really exciting to be a part of this project because we have 2 military bases helping each other in different states. We have 2 state agencies working together, and these guys are great to work with.
We have 2 other sources, one of which at Fort Knox, and we'll be sourcing 25 birds from there as well. Our third and final source is through Tall Timbers Research out of North Florida. We'll be sourcing up to 50 birds annually for that 3-year period. So here in Virginia, we'll be checking our traps at night around sunset, and once we capture them, work them up, take our measurements, apply bands, radios as needed, these birds are moving north. I have drivers lined up each night to be able to take them from where we're capturing them here and bring them straight to Letterkenny. They'll get there sometime in the middle of the night and then be released first thing in the morning once it's light out and they're able to learn their new home.
Yeah, we're fortunate to be on a piece of ground here that we have good knowledge of. I've been the natural resource manager here at Fort Barfoot since 2013, so we're fortunate enough to manage and still have good, viable bobwhite populations to hopefully fit the bill for this project of translocating to Pennsylvania and helping out an extirpated species there. The relationships that we're building with this project could last a lifetime.
We're very fortunate to have a number of great partners helping us out with this reintroduction and hoping to take you along for the ride.
All right, we ready? 3, 2, 1.
All right. So it's quite an interesting video. I found it fascinating when I saw it because if you talk to the Pennsylvania Game Commission, they will adamantly say that pheasants are put and take for hunters, although they are an invasive species of the state of Pennsylvania, which is an entirely different conversation. You have to really start breaking this down, that if pheasants are incapable of surviving in the habitat of Pennsylvania, you have to start breaking down the why. And then you correlate that over to this Bob White conversation. There were a few interesting tidbits about that video. Number one, that was actually a video. I know you only heard the audio, but the video piece is extremely critical. Why that's critical is there was a lot of agricultural work being done when they talk about habitat improvement. So they were actually brush hogging, they were disking, and they were planting food sources for the upland birds. This is critical. These are things that I've talked about in the past that could and should be done on game lands. I was literally just at a meeting with the Game Commission, and they are adamantly opposed to such a premise and an idea. Because they do not want any agricultural style, improvements or enhancements to improve habitat that isn't 1,000% natural to the state of Pennsylvania. But if you watch this exact video, that does not concur that thought or ideology or in any way, shape, or form reflect how they are, in some capacities, creating a template for success, because it's a critical piece to have success. You have to have food for these animals. Also, they talked about the cover and the things that are necessary in that capacity. The one thing that is the elephant in the room, which the food is obviously critical, and they are planting for the animals. They're taking this landscape and gearing it at one species, right? So, like, they're targeting specifically the bobwhite quail, which I find to be fascinating, because this is exactly the arguments for, okay, if you're going to stock, for example, pheasants in certain areas, or for that matter, let's say you put quail in certain areas, you have to have certain habitats that are conducive for them to exist. Grasslands, marginal areas, cover, food, so on and so forth. The list goes on and on. The one thing that is super critical about this video, and it only got highlighted extremely small, and they didn't even talk about it beyond just acknowledging it, was predators. The one thing they do not talk about is their predator management plan. They don't talk about how they're handling that, and they actually don't talk about specifically of what are they planting agriculturally to provide food. Now, I have some inside sources with the Pennsylvania Game Commission, and this program has now come into the state of Pennsylvania, and it is my understanding that they are actually feeding the bobwhite quail. They're feeding them constantly, like putting out actual like bird food for these birds. That's number one. Number two, they have a 7-day-a-week predator management plan. Now, I want you to think about this. I've said in past shows the critical nature of managing predators and how they've gotten utterly out of control in the state of Pennsylvania, and how the Pennsylvania Game Commission does not have adequate data to back up not only their stances and views, but also we as a general public that are out seeing the impacts and implications. I mean, I literally had at our farm the other day a great horned owl land and kill a rabbit in broad daylight in the lawn space area near a dwelling. If that doesn't tell you that these predators in their own capacities are, scales are tipped. You have predators that are coming out in abundant amounts, more than they ever would naturally. Also, for hundreds of years, we clearly, prior to us agriculturally growing things in the state of Pennsylvania, obviously Pennsylvania was predominantly hardwoods. through many sections of Pennsylvania. But as we've began our efforts of agricultural, I would say, manipulation of the ground and diversified habitats throughout the entire state, it's actually benefited many different species, whether they are inhabiting those particular areas or if they're even migratory animals. When you look at the predator piece of the puzzle, I actually gave this discussion the other day. The Game Commission does not want to do things on game lands to enhance habitat for wildlife unless it meets a narrative. And I am beyond baffled by the arguments given to not enhance habitat. You have to understand something. Let's just use white-tailed deer as an example. This statistic came directly from the Pennsylvania Game Commission that approximately 85% of all white-tailed deer are harvested on private lands. Private lands that in many capacities are impacted in a positive regard by different forms of agriculture, human manipulation. I don't care if it's things like housing developments where deer come into housing developments and are eating everybody's hostas. Clearly that is a food source for the white-tailed deer. Now, that's just white-tailed deer. We're not talking about all these other species as well. But when you look at it from the capacity that the Game Commission's unwilling to do things on game lands because they say it's not natural, but yet, for example, a Chinese pheasant is an invasive species to the United States. It's not an invasive species to Pennsylvania. It's an invasive species to our country. But it's acceptable for them to be here because, oh, well, they can sell pheasant stamps. But we can't then go and do things. I mean, the rest of the state, humans have impacted the landscape in some way, shape, or form. But we can't take these properties and improve them and enhance them for wildlife as a whole simply because, oh, well, there's some cookie-cutter answer and it's just unacceptable. Well, you look at what they're doing right now with these bobwhite quail, and they're doing exactly that because it meets somebody's agenda or somebody's views or vantage points for that particular project. And that is the problem with the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Certain people get into the agency and they have particular views and political agendas, in my opinion, and they will twist those views and agendas for whatever freaking argument it is that they want to have, and they don't want to sit there and look at the facts. Just like the predators. They have no clue right now as to any predator populations in the state of Pennsylvania. I also gave this other argument. I said, okay, how many millions, and I'm talking millions of upland birds are stalked annually in the state of Pennsylvania? And I'm not talking just the Pennsylvania Game Commission. Clearly, the Game Commission stalks, I think it's over 1 million pheasants, don't quote me. I don't have that statistic in front of me, but they stalk well over 1 million pheasants in a year. Then let's look at people with upland bird farms that stalk pheasants. Let's look at people that have just releases on their own private properties. You're talking about millions and millions of birds put into the food chain within our ecosystem. What happens? Well, some of them, when they're released, some of them just aren't going to make it. Some of them are going to get picked off by predators right away. Some of them are going to be shot by hunters and wounded and just basically unable to fly, picked off by predators. Why is this critical? We are gorging the ecosystem with extra food sources unnaturally, which then you're now creating a haven for predators to have extra food. Extra food means healthier predators mean they're going to reproduce in larger rates and quantities because the ecosystem will accommodate them. The problem is, not only are they going to eat, for example, pheasants that we stalk, they're going to destroy bobwhite quail. They're going to destroy eastern cottontail rabbits. They're going to destroy baby turkeys that hatch and are poults running around. They're going to get into turkey nests and destroy the nests. They're going to destroy ruffed grouse nests. I mean, does everybody see the causes and effects here? If we do not acknowledge and address the predator issues in Pennsylvania with yes, we as a human race have impacted the habitat in Pennsylvania, and in many ways, in many ways, have it improved it for wildlife. That being said, we are not managing our game lands accordingly to reflect that similar improvement and enhancement strategies, which the Game Commission flat out says, well, when there was more farms and whatnot, we were seeing more species and we were seeing different. Yeah, no crap. You have more food sources. What do you think people were doing on those farms? People had trap lines running around those farms. This isn't rocket science. We're not acknowledging the facts. When people had small town USA farms, say 100, 200 acre farm, people had sheep, people had goats, people had whatever it may be on a small scale. They have to protect their livelihoods, because if they didn't protect their livelihoods, guess what? Is it you and your family eating, or are you going to feed a coyote, or are you going to feed a red-tailed hawk, or are you going to feed, an owl? It doesn't matter what species it is. If something's going to come in and destroy your livelihood and eat what you have to put food on the table, of course people back then did what they had to do. These things are ignored today. These common facts are ignored. So when the farms shut down, trap lines, look at trapping prices, look at trapping cells. The number of trappers in the state has astronomically over the years declined. So you have an incremental correlation with decline of trappers going down. You have farms going down. You have the predator issue then. And also fur prices have skyrocketed up. So you then have the same correlation that the predators have increased. What else has increased? Oh, well, the number of pheasants and even these upland bird farms in Pennsylvania increased. The problem is we're not acknowledging the fact that trappers have gone down. The need of trapping to keep conservation and ecosystem in balance is beyond a necessity. It is literally, it is so in front of us, and for us to not acknowledge it and to talk to these folks within the Game Commission that, I look, I mean no ill, but the amount of people that I met out of the Pennsylvania Game Commission that came right out of college and went right there and basically took their college ideologies and whatever they were taught and went right into the Game Commission, never had a real job, never created a job, never ran a farm, never managed a farm, never dealt with the trials and tribulations of any of these hurdles that we're talking about, never had to deal with any of this stuff. And these are the people that are making the decisions of how to manage game, how to manage wildlife. And I find it to be astonishing. I find it to be astonishing that the cold, hard facts are being ignored. The fact that, we can't manage game lands because of a million excuses, but somebody wants to have this pet little bobwhite quail project, and for that we're going to tell people, we got to burn and we got to do A, B, and C, but we're not going to tell you that we have to feed them. We're not going to tell you about our predator control plan. We're going to keep those little tidbits secret from you. And those secrets, we're not going to tell you of the agricultural need that we had to do here to make this work. We're not going to tell you the whole picture. We're going to give you what we want you to see, not the whole necessity of what you need to see, because what you need to see is exactly what needs to be done across the entire state to address many, many, many of our trials and tribulations when it comes to small game hunting, when it comes to predator management, when it comes to the issues of farmers as a whole, even when it comes to crop damages. I want to transition into that. So, we had a meeting. We're talking about crop damages. It gets brought up about all these permits, and I literally said, somebody says to me, well, what about the permits that are available? I said, your programs do not work. These ag tags and whatever else you want to go down the rabbit hole, you got all this stuff. It doesn't work. And somebody's like, well, can you give an example? I said, well, yeah, I get up at 5 a.m. I start working at the farm around 6. I was like, most days I'm not done until 6 o'clock at night or later, depending on what I'm doing. And then you expect me to have to go out and then hunt all night, to have to shoot deer and then have to process them accordingly to your standards and do whatever it is that needs to be done. That's what you expect. You expect me to have to not deal with and this is just, I'm saying it from my perspective. Like, it's not just me. It's any other person. Like, you expect people to have to, like, spend time away from their families to have to manage wildlife? We as individuals, yes, we buy hunting licenses and people do things to try to be part of hunting, trapping, fishing in Pennsylvania, the pastimes. It is not your job as a person to have to actually work all day and then basically take on an extra job to work all night to manage wildlife. That is what the Game Commission's job is to do. That is what they're tasked to do. And the fact that, oh, we'll just, and then I was told, well, just shoot them. And I was like, just shoot them? Just shoot them. Like, you want me to just shoot animals without proper authorizations and permits and whatever? I was like, the problem here is that you guys need to understand that every property, every trial and tribulation of every person is different. And the fact is, you've created all these programs and your programs don't work. You make it too hard. There's so many layers. I'm sorry, but a game warden or whoever's qualified and actually knowledgeable enough and to actually understand the trials and tribulations and say, okay, well, you need to be able to do A, B, and C. And that person should be able to intelligently allow you to do what you need to do to manage your property, or they should be able to come in and do what they need to do to work with you to address the needs of that particular farm, that particular location, whatever it may be. The problems that I see, okay, so then I was asked, well, I get different stories from the game wardens. Like, the game wardens basically are saying, like, they're doing their jobs and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, hey, I can't speak to every game warden across the state of Pennsylvania. I was like, but I will tell you an enlightening story. I was like, we were doing habitat improvement on a stream, and the beavers moved in and started damming up the stream and causing stream bank erosion, and they started damaging the actual habitat structures. I literally had the game wardens come down, say, hey, we'd love for you to trap them and by all means move them somewhere else. They're there. You'd have thought I had 5 heads. It was like, well, somebody had to have put those sticks there. And I was like, what are you talking about? Put the sticks there? It's a beaver dam. What are you talking about? Well, looks like those sticks must have floated downstream and piled up like that. Well, that's amazing. How would that have happened? This was in the fall. We didn't even have high water yet. Like, these sticks were literally like 4 foot thick, piled up. Like, how in what time frame did this happen that the water came? Because certainly none of us that live here have seen the water get this high this fall. So that's amazing. And they went and looked at the beaver hut and then presumed to say that, oh, these aren't beavers. These are bank beavers. And you can't do anything about bank beavers. And literally left, and no solutions were garnered. No solutions have ever been garnered. So I tell this story to everybody, and everybody was in like disbelief. And I said, yes, you can't address the issues because the people that you go to that you're supposed to get the solutions from are incompetent. No disrespect to anybody, but I think a spade needs called a spade. Like, you can't fix things when you have a person that's, I mean, I'm sorry, but if someone isn't qualified to flip cheeseburgers and they're trying to flip a cheeseburger, you're probably going to have an undercooked or a burnt cheeseburger. Period, end of story. It does that. Those concepts apply to any other job. It doesn't matter what arena you're in. If you're not qualified and understanding what you're doing, you're probably not going to do a great job. My same arguments go with the DEP when it comes to permitting and that whole cabal. I think there's too many people that have absolutely no clue what they're doing. They have no clue what they're looking at. And to be honest, they never created a job. They never dealt with trials and tribulations. So they don't give a hoot how long it takes them because they have the power. They have the authority to say, you know what, I'm busy. I'm too busy to look at your permit today, you little peasant. And that's how these other agencies look at this. Not to get on the kick about the DEP, but that's like, that is a cancer to the state of Pennsylvania, an absolute cancer. But these ideologies, back to the Pennsylvania Game Commission, we are not going to move forward. We are absolutely not going to move forward when the Game Commission is literally stymieing progress, stymieing the facts. They don't even want to know the data. It's all a guess. It is all a guess. And then the final thing I want to move into, I saw some charts about just different disease when it comes to the deer in Pennsylvania and the different units and the CWD. That is a mind-boggling, mind-blowing premise that they completely are mismanaging. Completely. We were talking about butcher shops. The fact that, well, they need to get more butcher shops that want to accept these deer, and then they have to properly dispose of them. And they go through their whole spiel, and I said, well, wait a minute. What are you compensating them? And the lady looks at me. You'd have thought I spoke a different language. And the person says, oh, well, we put their name on our website. And I'm like, wait a minute. You're telling me, you're telling everybody that these deer have a disease, quote unquote, and you expect these people to bring this in around other deer that are being processed for the community, and you then expect them to take on the liability and also the financial burden of disposing of them, and you're just going to put their name on a website. Well, yeah, but some people don't even want their name on a website because then they're already overloaded. They can't handle anymore. My brain could have, I had to have had smoke rolling out of my ears. I was like, oh my goodness. These people are clueless as to how economics works. Like if you do a task for somebody, there's a compensation. There's a financial exchange. There's a monetary exchange. There's a give and take. You can't get participants because you're not paying anybody. You're not compensating anybody. Why in the world would anybody want to do anything for you when you think that just putting their name on a website, here's a link to Joe's Butcher Shop. Oh, yes, because I know that there's so many people in the state of Pennsylvania that go and actually look at that list. Like, what a joke. What a joke. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing, folks? These people are managing our food chain system. They're managing wildlife. What are we doing? Like, this is a crying travesty. Like, and then they look at you with a straight face like it's acceptable. And then I asked the question, I was like, okay, like I looked at the map from 10 years ago about CWD and now it's astronomically expanded. I said, what are you going to do in another 10 to 20 years? Oh, well, we're managing it. Well, it doesn't seem like you're managing it. It seems like it's literally expanding exponentially at crazy rates. Like, what are you going to do to fix it? Well, it was kind of like pitter-patter back and forth, kind of a bunch of excuse making. And I said, well, wait a minute here. If this is such a concern, how much money is being allocated annually towards research and even prevention or resolutions to this particular problem? Well, and the stutter and began. And then the next thing you know, well, Penn State Extension, they're the ones looking into it. And I'm like, wait a minute. You're the wildlife management agency with $500 million in your bank account, in your reserve fund, doing nothing with it. And you're not allocating annual monies specifically towards research on this particular issue to address it accordingly and figure out solutions. Well, you have to understand. No, I don't have to understand. I don't have to understand anything. What I have to understand is I do understand. I understand that you're sitting here acknowledging you have an astronomical problem that you don't understand at all. That's where the no understanding is. That people are being told a farce that, this is a problem, but yet it is exponentially growing and you people are just, it just keeps going. We just got to live with it. Well, this is something I would highly recommend anybody that has the opportunity. Look at the Game Commission's website. Look at their processes and procedures about it. Go and research about the money that I'm talking about. Go research about what the butchers get paid. It's their ideology of how they want to manage this problem, to me, is insane. I think it's a joke. It's going to continue to expand. And then they put out these letters or whatever, scaring the crap out of people. basically to the point where people then don't want to harvest the deer because then they're like, oh, well, could I get sick or could my family get sick? It's no different than these butchers. So because they don't want to get their hands around it, they don't want to address it, they don't want to do what needs to be done scientifically to get the facts of the situation, we want to rely on other people outside third parties to try to maybe figure it out for us. And hence this goes back to even other discussions about the quantitative data and the lack thereof, and the fact that they have a shotgun approach to many things, and basically they take small sample sizes and extrapolate that and think, oh, well, that's acceptable for a whole WMU because somebody thought that was a smart idea to make those. I mean, we could sit here and have arguments about data, and you know what? I look forward to the discussions about data because I can assure you there's no data-driven company, business, etc., that is going to agree with the WMUs from what I've gathered and the way that data is not being utilized, the way the data is not being gathered. And I think that we have to really reevaluate how the Pennsylvania Game Commission is managing wildlife in this state. From the recent meeting I was at and the things that I heard, it was troubling at best. The fact that it's acceptable to put out minerals and bait anytime throughout the year other than deer season is acceptable. It's okay, but during deer season, oh my gosh, the disease that could run rampant through the whole state. But when you're not hunting, it's okay. No disease here to be found, folks. But for that political little talking point, oh, nope, we can't disease anybody. So then I asked the question. I was like, well, wait a minute here. The places in the state that you do allow baiting during hunting season are in the highest populations of humans and of deer in confined spaces. So if there was a disease outbreak or disease opportunity, you're talking about areas that it could extrapolate like a bomb. So you have to, when they say something, you have to take it like a sponge and soak it up and really just kind of take it in. And then you have to really, 1 + 1 is 2. Although they're, in many arguments, saying 1 + 1 is 3. So I have a lot more to definitely shine a light on these different topics. The habitat side of it with the game lands or lack thereof, the lack of data, the predator management plans in this state are terrible, the trapping protocols and the trapping needs based upon data and fact. And all of this even ties into USDA, it ties into U.S. Fish and Wildlife. You have so many layers of bureaucracy. And with the lack of data, there's nobody that's going to make good decisions. There's nobody going to make good decisions. And, data is such a critical piece of making good decisions because you know what? It takes away the politics of things. It takes away the opinions or people's just jamming a square peg in a round hole. I'm a firm believer in facts, and data does provide that when you're talking about how many deer tags should be allocated for counties, what's our target goal when it comes to trapping? Well, if we're not meeting our target goals for a viable, balanced ecosystem, then what are we going to do to meet those target goals beyond those numbers? These are things that have to be really looked at and really dissected. Same thing goes for, okay, well, if there's too many migratory raptor birds, what are we going to do about it? You can't sit here and just think that, oh, well, they're just going to go away. Well, what are we going to do to manage that problem? Because if they're impacting the ecosystem and creating an imbalance, which is clearly happening, what are we going to do about it? What are we realistically going to do? Because right now, saying we're going to do nothing is not resolving anything. All we're doing is feeding the problem, hence why I said we're putting out millions of upland birds and literally feeding and gorging the predators throughout the entire state. I even made a comment. I said, well, a lot of people are under this premise that, the coyotes are going to go and really address the deer herd issues throughout the state. Newsflash, folks, that hasn't happened. It's not going to happen. Do you want to know why? Anybody can go on a Facebook group throughout the state of Pennsylvania, or go into like some of these trail camera groups, and you're going to see pictures of coyotes and fox carrying pheasants, rabbits, people's cats, people's dogs, small game animals. The odds of them getting a deer are extremely, extremely minute in that first, I'm going to say 60 to 90 day window, which we're basically passing out of right now. Beyond that, the other 9 months out of the year, good luck. Good luck with that. It's not going to happen. Coyotes and other ground predators are going to target other things: eggs, nests, again, rabbits, upland birds, so on and so forth. And we're just not addressing the issues that we have. And I really want everybody to think about these things, because we got a lot more great shows. I'm going to have some guests on it specifically about the data and all the other, topics that we hit on today. I want to go back and give a special thanks to our sponsors, the Mariana Outdoorsman Association. Check us out, MarianaOutdoors.com. Again, MarianaOutdoors.com. 10 Mile Creek Outfitters, who manages Wild Acres Farm, Fishery, and Regulated Hunting Grounds, 724-579-0924, 10mileco.org. Washington County Tourism Promotion Agency, please visit Washington County, Pennsylvania. And then the U.S. Oil and Gas Alliance, and also ZLC Services. This is Jason White. You've listened to The Great Outdoors. God bless. Enjoy that rain for everybody out there, and I'll talk to you next week.